Hi, everyone. So today we are talking about rate of change, and I have this graph here for us to talk about and to reference. And what this point of the activity wants you to think about is just how would you analyze or look at or even make certain computations with data if you're trying to ask yourself at what rate was such and such increasing, or at what rate was such and such decreasing. So for this particular context, we have a graph of data regarding the number of hospitalized daily cases of coronavirus in Arizona. And specifically, we're going to talk about the time periods from April 15th through May 15th, and then once again from May 15th to June 15th. So let's start with the time period of April 15 to May 15. So if we wanted to ask ourselves, how fast were the daily hospitalizations increasing in that time period from April 15th through May 15th? Well, what kinds of things would you have to know? What data would you care about in order to answer this question? Well, first of all, we'd have to ask ourselves, well, gee, how many daily hospitalizations were there in the beginning of this time period? So in April, on April 15th, how many hospitalizations per day were there? Well, there was 590 hospitalizations per day on April 15th. But then, as you can see, it was indeed slowly increasing as we entered May, and then here we are at May 15th, and it turns out at the end of that time period, it had increased to 808 daily hospitalizations per day, or daily hospitalizations of coronavirus. So how fast were they increasing in that time period? Well, you'd have to ask yourself, how much did the cases grow? How much did they increase by? And in order to answer that question, you have to ask yourself what the difference is. So how much does it have to grow to get from 590 to 808? Well, whatever that difference is will tell you how much the cases increased by. And 808 minus 590 is 218, I believe. Okay, so the cases or hospitalizations per day increased 218 hospitalizations. Okay, that's wonderful, it's a fact. However, if you're wanting to talk about at what rate did they increase, well, the time period is very important. If I were just to say, oh, the hospitalizations went up 218, your very next question should be, okay, well, was that in a day? Was that in a month? Was that over the course of a year? What are we talking about right now? Because 218 could be a very, very, very small number with regards to rate of change, or 218 could be an alarmingly huge number with regards to rate of change, depending on the time period that corresponds. So for this particular one, you can look at it one of two ways. You can either say that it was 218 additional hospitalizations over the course of that month. That would be one way to communicate that rate of change is, oh, hey, they went up 218 hospitalizations in that month. Or if you wanted to break it down per day, April only has 30 days in it. And so it would be from April 15 to May 15 would be an increase of 218 hospitalizations over the course of 30 days. And if you wanted to figure out what that meant on a daily basis, you could divide that out and see. So if it was 218 hospitalizations, increase of hospitalizations over the course of 30 days, well, then that would break down to, I divided that, that is approximately, where's my little pen? There it is. That's approximately 7.2, if I round it, 7 additional hospitalizations each day. So these are both valid rates of change with regards to that month's time period. Now, if we wanted to answer that same question for the period from May 15 to June 15, Well, once again, you would have to just ask yourself, well, what information do I care about? If I'm now wanting to look at the rate of change from May 15 to June 15, well, then what information do I care about now? Well, what was happening on May 15? We already said that on May 15, there was 808 hospitalizations per day. But if we look at June 15, you can see that that number grew. Hospitalizations per day had grown to 1,449. And we erase that. Let's see. Undo. There we go. So 1,449 hospitalizations per day. Okay, well again, rate of change is curious. What happened between point A and point B? So we were sitting at 808 cases per day. It had gone up to 1,449. So the question is, how much did it go up by? And the way that we answer that is by figuring out the difference between them. So what is the difference between 1449 and 808? Well, let's grab our calculator here. It is 641. Okay, but once again, 641 additional hospitalizations each day. You know, that sounds really, really big, but what if it was 641 hospitalizations per day over the span of a year? Well, that's actually not that many increase of hospitalizations if it was spread out over a year. What if it was 641 additional hospitalizations in a matter of hours? Okay, well, that means something very different. So you have to incorporate the change, not only with what the output values are doing, but what was the corresponding change in the inputs. So once again, this was over the span of a 1 month period. So you could simply say that there was an increase of 641 hospitalizations per day over the course of a month. So for each month of increase, that's how many additional hospitalizations per day we were experiencing. Or if you wanted to break that down further and see what it was doing on a daily basis, May does have 31 days in it. So you'd have to incorporate that when you go from May into June. So this one would be an increase of 641 hospitalizations per day over the span of the 31 days in between May 15 and June 15. And so if you wanted to see what that was on a day-by-day breakdown, let's see, 641 divided by, I'm in my calculator right now, 31 days is 20.68 if I round it. So approximately 20.68 additional hospitalizations each day. Okay, so as you can see, when you look at the graph, we can definitely tell that the hospitalizations were increasing more quickly from May to June by just looking at the steepness of this curve, and that is confirmed in these numbers. So if you look at it over the span of a month, there was 218 additional cases per day between April and May, and yet between May and June, there was 641 additional hospitalizations each day. So certainly there was a larger increase of hospitalizations from May to June. And that gets confirmed once again if you look at the day-by-day breakdown. So from April to May, there was an increase of about 7 additional hospitalizations each day over the days from April to May. But if you look at the days between May and June, we were experiencing 20 additional hospitalizations each day between the months, or for all the days, I should say, in between May 15 and June 15. So when you're thinking about rate of change, the main takeaway message here is that you're analyzing the difference between the beginning point and the ending point, but also acknowledging how much time was elapsed. Now in this one, The time was measured in either months or days or whatever. And whatever the input axis is measuring, quite frankly, it might not always be time, but it's just the span of whatever the input axis was labeled as. So for us, it's over the span of time. For other contexts, it could be over a span of people, or a span of dollars, or a span of credit hours. If we were talking cost per credit hour, maybe the input is credit hours. But nonetheless, what we're looking at when we're talking about rate of change is we're asking ourselves, how did the output values change with relation, output values. How did the output values change with relation to, or per, how did the input values change? That right there is the heart and soul of rate of change. And so now the next couple of activities will give you a chance to wrap your brain around that and apply it, and also talk about what it means to take an average rate of change, because as you can see, these numbers did not go up consistently. So did it really increase 7.27 hospitalizations every day? Well, no, because you can see on this graph that it kind of fluctuated a little bit. And then same thing from May to June. Did it really go up exactly 20 hospitalizations each day? Well, no, definitely not. You can see it, it increased, and then it dropped a little bit the next day, and then it rose again, and then it dropped a little bit, and then maybe it plateaued for a couple days. So when you find these rates of change, and it's not a constant graph, we call that an average rate of change, and you'll have a chance to engage with that as well. So hopefully that makes sense with regards to how we think about our changes in quantities, and thank you for watching.